So I just posted a new poll, and I have to say I'm pretty disappointed with the number of people who don't seem to know what sriracha hot sauce is. What is up with that, man? What's up, guys? Alec Enkiri here, and welcome to the 40K Q&A. I'm going to be breaking this video up into two parts, so if we don't get to your question today, don't fret. We will get to it next time. And you guys really know the drill here, so let's just jump right into it, man. Question number 1, 5 pieces of accessory equipment that every home lifter should have. I know your DIY kettlebell is legit. What other secrets do you have? So for this question, I'm going to assume you've already got the basics covered, right? So you've already got a good barbell, you got some plates, you got a power rack, you got a bench, etc., etc. You've got the basics of your home gym already set up. You've already got my DIY kettlebell. So then in addition to that basic equipment that's kind of really the starter kit for your home gym, here are some other things that I think will prove incredibly useful in your training journey in no particular order. For starters, a sled. So I built my own sled. I built it for pretty cheap. I've loaded over 700 pounds onto the damn thing, and it's solid as hell, and it lets me work really freaking hard, man. Sled work is its own type of beast. You can't beat it. One heck of a workout. You can do heavy drags with it, heavy pulls with it, explosive resisted sprints of all different types of resistance levels. The sled is one of the most underrated training tools out there, so I recommend getting one or building one and using it often. Next is boxes. I use boxes for damn near everything in my gym, right? I jump on them. I use them to create deficits for lunges and split squat variations. I use them to create deficits for push-ups. I use them to prop my feet up for inverted rows to create all different kinds of body angles for different movements. I use them to drop my bumper plates, drop my barbell when I want the bar elevated, if I'm doing something like high pulls or power snatches or power cleans or jerks, etc., etc. So you can build sturdy and solid boxes very easily and pretty cheaply, and they will serve a million different uses in your home gym. Trust me, once you have them there, you will start to find different uses for them. They are very versatile, and they're a very helpful thing to have in your home gym. Next up is a loadable weight vest. So you can use this for push-ups, you can use it for dips, pull-ups, inverted rows, lunges, loaded jumps, or just plain loaded walking, aka ruck walking. Just throw the vest on, put some weights on it, and just go for a nice brisk walk. It makes that a little bit more challenging. It makes it a little bit more of a cardio endeavor. But also, a loaded vest, probably its most important thing is it turns calisthenics training into a progressive strength and hypertrophy modality that rivals and potentially even surpasses barbell training, at least as far as upper body work is concerned. So now with that loaded vest, you can progressively load the basic calisthenics skills, and you can use calisthenics without having to be hampered by having to learn the advanced skills, right? So with advanced calisthenics, people are often held back by being too lower body dominant, right? Somebody like me would have a hard time with it because the lighter that your legs are, the easier that those things are to get good at, and as well, bigger guys that have a problem with it because the heavier that your body weight is, the harder that it is to become a highly advanced calisthenics athlete. But when you focus instead on the basic calisthenics movements, just push-up variations, dips, and chin-ups primarily, and inverted rows, and you focus instead on using simple progressive overload with those basic movements, calisthenics training actually becomes one of the best ways to get big and strong in the long run, and that adjustable weight vest solves all the loading issues that would have previously precluded this. Next up is a sandbag for that dummy strength, baby. But you can carry sandbags in a variety of different ways. You can shoulder them, you can toss them overhead, you can toss them all around every which way. Sandbags hit the body a little bit differently. They build a type of strength that you don't really get from barbell training. So get one and use it often. And finally, get yourself a pair of swing straps from Spud Inc. These things are pretty cheap, and they take your loaded carries to the next level. They allow you to turn your barbell basically into a yoke, right? So now you can take a barbell and you can safely do carries with it on your back. You can safely do front rack carries with it. You can safely do Zercher carries with it. You don't really have to worry so much about losing the weight anymore, because now all the weight is hanging, right? It's just a few inches off the ground. So if you lose the bar, the weights just kind of hit the floor. I mean, not really what you want, but it's not a huge deal. It's not dangerous in the same way that just carrying a 400 or 500 pound barbell on your back would be. Another kind of ancillary benefit of this is that the swing straps swing right? So they create these reverberations that your torso, that your core now has to stabilize. So they really give you all the benefits of loaded carries while also taking that core training aspect of it really to the next level. The first time I used these things, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty freaking humbling. But they're cheap, they're portable, they basically let you do loaded carries anywhere that you go. Yeah, so I recommend grabbing up a pair. Next question, congrats. What is your view on gymnastics strength training? So I think there's a lot of skill involved in high level gymnastics, and kind of like what I was talking about in the previous question, I think that it favors guys who are light and guys who skip leg day. But outside of those limitations, obviously it's an amazing way to build a strong and jacked upper body. All you have to do is look at any high level gymnast to get that point across. That's if you're able to get good enough at those skill components that the advanced movements entail. And that might be a pretty large investment in terms of skill acquisition for most of us, and myself included. It's not really something that I'm personally all that interested in making the investment in. So in my opinion, a lot of guys are going to be better off, again, just sticking with basic calisthenic movements, which are really kind of the cousin to advanced gymnastic exercises or advanced calisthenic exercises, and then just stick with those basic movements and progressively load them instead. Just like you would with barbell training. And you can use those exercises to get brutally strong and brutally jacked all the same. They also offer a lot of other benefits that you don't get from the barbell. Next question, suggested exercise routine for a long life. Take at least 10,000 steps a day, do deep squats, and sprint often. It's really that simple. Now remember, all he said was exercise routine. We're not talking about lifestyle here outside of that. But as far as exercising for longevity goes, walking around a lot, squatting is going to keep your hips and everything mobile, strong legs, supple joints, and then sprinting often. It's going to be good for your heart health. It's going to keep you explosive. It's going to keep you young. Next question. Congrats, Alec. I've been around this channel for a while, and most of my gains were made with your advice. That's awesome, bro. I'm very glad I found this channel early on, though I do have to ask about your opinion on the Noble Natties. LOL. Also, a different question, have you ever checked out the programs on Superhero Jacked? They seem to be very popular, but the programs seem pretty poor to me. I'd like to hear what you think about one of those programs. So I didn't know what Superhero Jacked was, so I went to the website, had to do a heck of a lot of scrolling once I found the page I wanted to find the actual workout. But anyway, so I'd never been there before, never heard of it, so I just randomly clicked on, I think it was one of the superhero workouts. It was all segmented into superheroes, anime characters, that kind of thing. I think I clicked superheroes, then Marvel characters, and then I know who Juggernaut is, so I clicked on Juggernaut because he's a jacked dude, a strong dude, and I want to be jacked and strong, so I decided he'd be a good fictional character for me to emulate my workout after, right? So I got to the Juggernaut page, and after, again, shitload of scrolling, I discovered that the program on there was the actual Juggernaut method, which is an old program. I believe it was written by Chad Wesley Smith, who's a really strong dude. He was a very high-level powerlifter back in the day. And that program, honestly, it's a pretty standard deal in terms of old school strength and hypertrophy type stuff. It's basically a Western linear periodization type program. It's not how I would do it. It is not how I do it. For example, I think that the weekly percentage jumps would end up creating pretty massive weight jumps from week to week, right? So he has you jumping like something like 7.5%. From week to week within the same rep range. And I just think that kind of large weight jump ends up working better for guys who are already big and strong as opposed to guys who are trying to get big and strong. And in that latter case, I tend to favor a more methodical approach, a slower approach in terms of how we progress the weight from week to week. A lot of times I have guys use the same training weight for 2 or 3 weeks before we increase it at all. There's also some junk volume in that program, in my opinion. But what I do like is I like that AMRAP option on the final set of the day. It's what the little plus sign indicates, that you don't just hit the minimum rep number, but go for as many reps as you can hit on that last set of the day. And I do also like the undulating loading scheme as we kind of taper down in reps over the course of the mesocycle. It's pretty standard stuff, really. It's not my favorite way to do it. I think that there are better ways to do it, but I'm not going to say that it's a bad program, right? That said, I did only look at this one program. This one is pretty much a tried and true program, but I only looked at the one. I couldn't look at the rest of it because honestly, this website gave me cancer of the eyeballs, so I don't intend to revisit or check out any of the other programs there. Next question. Very cool. Do you recommend a program that would help in conditioning and pure strength? Of course I do. The Enkiri Elite Conjugate Manual and my Ultimate Performance Manual. Those will get you strong, they'll get you well conditioned, they'll get you jacked as well. That one was a gimme. Next question. Congrats, Alec. You've been a huge influence on me over the years and your hard work's paying off. I'm going through the Enkiri Elite Conjugate system for the second time and I'm seeing some fresh gains. Question, what do you think of complex motor pattern training / reflexive strength training for people like Garage Strength? Some of it seems like valid speed strength and strength speed work, but other bits seem gimmicky. Claims are that over a career it can increase signaling efficiency, coordination, and quickness of natural and voluntary movement patterns. Here's a link, yada, yada, yada. So he sent me to a whole playlist. I reviewed a lot of it, actually, and it's a whole thing, right? We could do an entire series on a playlist like that. I'm not going to, but we could. Like you said, though, dude, some of it is valid strength, speed, and speed strength training, and some of it really is just kind of gimmicky athletic training. So the kind of thing that I've actually given people crap for in the past. I can't really break it all down for you in this video, but I will say this. If your bullshit detector is going off, given the level of discernment that you've shown by asking this question in the first place, maybe you already know which of it is beneficial and which of it is gimmicky enough to not be something that you should waste your time on. It's really like once you get a feel for these sorts of things, you kind of know what's what, right? So trust your instinct, bro. Next question. Congrats, Alec. For my new program this year, I want to add dips on my push days for triceps. I've been using the assistance machine, been warming up with tricep pushdowns, and I've been trying a full range of motion. I've gotten some elbow pain from these. Any advice on how to properly do dips without pain? So this is a hard question to answer without knowing the other variables of your program, right? You say you've been using assistance on the assisted dip machine. How much assistance? How much assistance and how many reps are you able to get with the level of assistance that you've been giving yourself? That's going to kind of tell us what intensity level that you are currently setting yourself up with on these dips. So is it heavy work or is it light work based on that level of assistance that you've been using? How many reps have you been doing per session at that specific intensity level? How many times per week have you been doing it? What other pressing movements do you do each week? How heavy are they? How much volume? Etc., etc. What I'm getting at is it's most likely going to come down to managing the workload, right? When you're introducing a new movement, you should typically regress that movement to an extent that you're doing moderate or light work with it at first, and typically even then always still leaving several reps in reserve on your sets. And then from there, you kind of build your way up slowly over the course of the training cycle. And then you have to kind of factor in how that additional volume on the new movement, how that volume and that intensity interplays with the other movements that are already in your program. Because a novel stimulus may be more stressful on the joints because your body's not used to it, right? So you need to factor that in by starting it off very easy. And then you also probably need to adjust those other pre-existing variables that already exist in your program, because now the recovery balance is different than it was before, right? It's all really a balancing act. So I would encourage you to start easier than you think you need to build slower than you think you need to, and ultimately to be patient. Now, if you've already started kind of creating some agitation in the elbows, you might need to rest those dips for a few weeks in order to let that inflammation dissipate, and then you can probably make another run at working those dips back in your routine again. Again, by starting easier than you think you need to and building slower than you think you need to. Good luck, man. Next question. How much strength is enough strength for any particular sport? How can we determine that? How much strength does a football athlete need? How much does a distance runner need? It's sort of intuitive in my opinion, right? A distance runner doesn't need to be as strong as a sprinter. A golfer doesn't need to be as strong as a football player. Obviously, there's going to be some variability from position to position within different sports, but just for example, like soccer players, tennis players, basketball players, they all have actually pretty similar demands in their sports, and they would all do pretty well at roughly equivalent strength levels. But That's all sort of viewing things from an absolute sense. So in a relative sense, almost every single athlete, no matter what their sport is, will be a better athlete if they can get a little bit stronger than they are right now. That's just a rule of thumb, so don't get carried away with it. But especially at less than world-class levels, it's going to be a pretty reliable concept, right? A little bit more strength within reason, and assuming that the athlete is not at a point where the diminishing returns simply make that investment not worth it, then a little bit more strength is typically going to bring the athletic ceiling up a little bit higher in most endeavors. It doesn't really answer the question that you asked per se, but in my opinion, it's sort of an unanswerable question because it really comes down to the individual athlete, their sport, their position within that sport, and what their strengths and weaknesses already are. Next question. I got a herniated disc while I was 21 years old. I don't know from what specifically. It started as mild soreness, then it got worse. Excuse me. Maybe doing judo too intensely or squatting with differently strong / mobile legs. What mistakes should I watch out for and what exercises keep my back safe? Just in a general sense, having strong and mobile hips is going to be a good idea. Having a strong and mobile posterior chain is also going to be a good idea. Learning how to perform deep hinges, like those good mornings that I like to do, the hyperextensions I like to do, RDLs from a deficit or with a snatch grip. Learning how to hinge deeply like that with a straight back and building the training weights up there slowly in order to strengthen the lower back, strengthen the glutes, strengthen the hammies. That's all going to be a good insurance policy. Also potentially, and you have to be careful here, but also potentially learning how to work on some rounded back stuff as well. Things like Jefferson curls, typically with lighter weights. That can be helpful. Anecdotally, a lot of guys actually swear by that as helping to improve their back pain, but there is some risk to it, and it really does kind of depend on what the different ailments of the back are. There's a million different types of things that can cause back pain, and so a lot of people will respond differently to different things. So you have to be careful there, right? There is some risk to that, but there's also some risk to heavy, full range of motion good mornings like I do too. So everything has its pluses, everything has its negatives. We have to see how we respond to any type of stimulus as an individual. Also, do your ab work. So a mix of static and dynamic stuff. I like leg raises, just for example, as a dynamic work. I like doing different planking and rollout variations for static work. I also like to strengthen the hips in isolation as well. So the rotational aspects of the hips, as well as flexion, abduction, adduction, that typically ensures both adequate mobility and adequate strength in the hips. And then finally, load management, right? So excessive fatigue from poor programming or poor lifestyle is going to get anybody injured eventually, and you have to find the right balance of those variables for your lifestyle, and that can change over time as well. So if you're sleeping less now than you used to be sleeping, just for example, because of work, kids, etc., whatever it may be, you might need to tone down your training for a period of time in order to accommodate that, right? Injury risk reduction it's a malleable process. Injury risk is a malleable process. And so we kind of have to evolve along with that. Next question. First, congratulations on achieving 40K and thanks for providing us such good information and videos. My question is, as a slim guy, what would be your best training recommendation in order to gain more muscle mass? Training more reps with less weight, drop sets, or pyramids, increasing weight? Thanks, Enkiri. So both, really, right? Use the first couple movements in your session as primary training exercises where the intent is to gradually lift more weight across a series of different rep ranges. So for example, you can break your primary movements up into 8 to 10 reps, 6 to 8 reps, 4 to 6 reps, and 3 reps or less. And then you can focus on slowly building up the training weights within each respective rep range over the course of several mesocycles, while judiciously rotating between similar but different movements. And then with your next 2 to 3 movements in the training session, kind of the accessory and the tertiary stuff, that's where you can shift the focus onto higher reps and quality training volume as the primary focus, with less of a concern on how much weight you are moving. So here, that's where things like drop sets and myo reps and things of that nature are going to come into play. Those things all have their place, and I use them myself, but I use them judiciously. I wouldn't overdo it in that respect either. Next question. Congrats, Alec, on hitting 40K. As someone who's focused on hypertrophy for a while and willing to take up strength and athleticism, do you have any suggestions on how one should go about this? Really just start small. right? So with athletic stuff, add in some submaximal sprints, add in a variety of submaximal jumps, get comfortable exploding at half speed, and then slowly work the intensity levels up as you gain coordination and as you gain comfort. Throw in some agility drills using that same concept. Start at half speed and build the intensity up slowly over a few weeks. You got to get comfortable moving your body in a variety of ways when it comes to building general movement proficiency, whether you plan to play a sport or not. Add some resisted sprints into the mix, other things like loaded jumps, other explosive exercises like swings, maybe some basic Olympic lift variations. Start very small at first, build the intensities and the volumes up slowly as your body acclimates, yada yada. For strength work, that's simple. Just follow a tried and true strength training program. There are a million of those out there. Just pick one that's from a reputable guy, a reputable source, one that has a lot of positive reviews from over the years, and stick with it. Do the whole dang program, don't program hop, and then rinse, wash, repeat, right? But in terms of the athletic stuff, the explosiveness, the movement capacity, those are physical attributes that really take a while to mature. So the training therein requires time, firstly, to acclimate to, just in order to make sure you don't get hurt, and then to really build off of. It's kind of a slow burn concept. I've talked about that before. So if you're serious, start small and dig in. There's really nothing more satisfying than watching your raw athleticism improve. Next question, is switching grips and vertical pulling movements important to prevent overuse injuries? I do believe that rotating through different grips in your vertical pulls is a very good idea, both from the perspective of minimizing overuse injury risk, as well as from the perspective of building a more comprehensive and well-rounded pulling strength in the long run. Next question, for hypertrophy, is 1 myo rep set just as good or close to just as good as 3 regular sets with 1.5 minutes rest in between the regular sets? So myo, 1 activation set, 15 seconds rest, and then 5 mini sets with 15 seconds rest between each mini set, assuming 0 to 1 RIR on everything. Thank you. For hypertrophy stuff, and for lower skill movements that you tend to use less weight on, where the focus is always going to be more so on accumulating reps, feeling the muscle, getting good pump, all that kind of stuff, then I would say yes, there's probably not going to be very much long-term hypertrophy difference between the two things that you presented here relative to the context of the larger program. Obviously, that's always going to be a factor as well, but assuming pretty much everything else being equal, there's not really going to be a difference between somebody doing 3 straight sets, somebody doing the myo sets as you described in terms of the long-term hypertrophy outcomes. Next question, shoulder inflammation during bar muscle ups. Is the ring muscle up a better option? It's quite possible that the rings will agree with your shoulders more due to the freedom of movement they provide, the rotational ability that they provide. The only way to know for sure, though, is to give it an earnest shot and see how your body responds, man. Next question. Congrats on the big 40. Any idea of how to program the Olympic lift variations, hang, power, etc. for general strength? I'm not interested in learning the full Olympic lifts, but they've always looked pretty cool to me. So my recommendation would be to pick a variation that you want to get good at, firstly. Preferably one of those truncated lower skill variations that you described, and then ramp your way up to a challenging set of 5 reps on that movement. Don't kill yourself, but find something that feels challenging for a set of 5. Try to leave 1, 2, maybe 3 RIR on that set. If you happen to miss, whatever, you've never done it before, who really cares? But try to find that point, roughly. And then we'll call that your 5 RM. Now, next time you go to the gym, take 85% of that 5 RM, do 4 sets of 4 to 6 reps with that weight. Every 2 or 3 weeks, add 5 pounds to the bar and repeat the process. Build that variation in that fashion for a few months. Once it starts to stall a little bit, then switch it up, right? Pick a different variation and do the exact same thing. So now you've got 2 different ones in your pocket that you can use later on. I would recommend learning a 3rd one just for the sake of variety, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Either way, that is going to keep you occupied for several months, probably half a year at a minimum. If you get to that point, things are probably going to get a little bit more complicated. Then you can ask me for a custom program. Next question, how would you program an arm day? Would it be just heavy bicep and tricep exercises, or start with compounds, just modified to bias the arms, making it an arm-focused upper day? Probably not that last one, because I don't want to disregard the other components of the upper body training just to bias the arms, right? Typically, when somebody that I'm coaching wants bigger arms, what we will do is we'll basically keep the primary upper sessions exactly the same as we would have been doing anyway, but we'll add 1 or 2 bicep and tricep exercises at the end of those upper body workouts. That's generally 2 times per week. And here we'll usually use, say, something like a lying tricep extension or a barbell curl, that kind of thing. Something we can push hard and heavy on and try to hopefully slowly increase the loading on over time as well. Then in addition to that, we will add in an auxiliary arm only workout 1 to 2 times per week, where we hit another 2 to 3 movements each for the biceps and triceps. Typically in the order of, so like, we'll do like something moderately heavy on the first movement, something medium weight on the second movement, and then something light and pumpy on the third movement. So for example, if we're just talking about the triceps, for that arm day, we might do something like a French press to start off with, 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps. Then maybe we'd move on to a diamond push-up and we'd do 3 sets, 3, maybe 4 sets, whatever, of 12 to 15 reps. And then we'd finish up with that pump style movement. So maybe this would now be a tricep push down, for example. And here we'd probably do something like 3, 4, 5 sets of 15 to 20 reps, right? And then we'll do the same exact thing for the biceps, 3 exercises in that exact same fashion. We will pair those movements as antagonistic pairing, so we're alternating between tricep and bicep work. And we would do that auxiliary arm workout 1 to 2 times per week. Shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. Next question, do you ever recommend or program more intensive plyometric drills like various hurdle jumps in different planes of motion? Why or why not? So I do things like that myself, things like skater jumps, where you leap from left to right, alternating legs, as well as things like zigzag bounding. So I'll jump forward off 2 legs like I would to start a regular double leg bound, but at the same time, I'll also jump a few feet to the left or a few feet to the right, whichever way I happen to start. And then I will zigzag, right, one side to the other from jump to jump. So I'm continually jumping forward while also zigzagging back and forth. And I do things like this somewhat regularly myself, not super consistently, but not sporadically either. However, I don't really program stuff like this for other people very often because these sorts of things simply aren't applicable to my average clientele, right? So I get a lot of guys who come to me who want to be bigger and stronger in general. I get a lot of guys who want to be better at powerlifting or strongman specifically. And then I get a lot of athletes who have a very specific goal in mind, such as improving their 40-yard dash or their vertical jump for a test that they have coming up. So whereas these sorts of drills are going to be best utilized in the sense of improving general athleticism and movement capacity, I think that they're going to be less important when you're talking about improving specific strength or athletic tasks. So specific tasks like running a faster 40 or getting a higher vertical jump, this would really just be wasted energy. It wouldn't really fit in with a training economy concept. So it's not that I don't think these things have value. I do them myself. It's just that the value is not typically there for the people who I tend to be coaching. Next question. Congrats on 40K. I'm learning how to front squat. I feel my right wrist becoming strained as I reach the bottom of the squat. I think this is partly from me leaning forward some, maybe a lack of upper back strength, but I'm wondering if it's something else like wrist mobility. What are some good tips to help maintain uprightness in the front squat and to work on mobility? Will just doing front squats and going slow and progressing the weight be enough over time to correct any problems on their own? Thank you. So, it's most likely due to a combination of the hips popping up, causing the torso lean forward, and then the upper back tending to cave over along with that as well. The bar then rolls forward, and the wrists end up taking on a lot of undue strain when that happens. This happens to me sometimes too, when my upper back caves over more than I want it to, or more than it should. In my case, it's certainly not a mobility issue. It's just a patterning and strength issue. In terms of fixing it, I've been front squatting for over 10 years and I'm still trying to fix it. Part of it's going to be related to how your body is built, right? So if you don't have a squatter's build, this is always going to be an uphill battle. It's always going to be something that you have to be focusing on every time you're working on this movement. So just always being mindful of how you're moving, logging as many crisp, clean reps as possible. Those things are going to go a very long way. You should be filming yourself so that you can make sure that what you're actually doing matches what you think you're doing. Another really good thing is going to be adding in pause work and pin work. So nothing is going to highlight positional inefficiencies and poor leg drive out of the hole of a front squat like stopping in the deepest part of the squat for a few seconds, or even more pronounced in this, is setting the bar onto pins. So pin squats are their own breed of difficult in general, but people do not seem to realize how many orders of magnitude that difficulty becomes when you do a pin front squat as compared to a pin back squat. Any degree of forward lean whatsoever at the torso is automatically penalized immensely until you get it right, because it's goddamn near impossible to set a weight down on the front of your shoulders from this position and actually get it back up off those pins, right? So you can also use the pins as well to gradually increase the range of motion that you're able to hit with efficient positioning. So you're able to make sure that you can maintain optimal position through a certain range of motion because you have an exact range of motion that you're trying to get to. And then you can gradually increase that range of motion as your hips kind of open up and your position and your efficiency increases. And I recommend starting at a height where you can execute the movement basically perfectly and then increasing the range of motion by just 1 or 2 inches roughly every 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously, you're going to have to play that by ear depending on how things are going, but that's probably a pretty good rule of thumb. Good luck, dude. Next question. Are you ever going to focus on calisthenics skills, such as a one-arm pull-up? To be honest, I think the strength might be there, planche or front lever. So really not likely, because kind of like what I talked about earlier, I'm really not that interested in the skill investment aspect where advanced calisthenics is concerned. I really prefer just sticking with the basic calisthenic movements and then progressively loading them like I do with barbell training. But hey, never say never, right? And next question, last question of the day. Were you ever tempted to do one cycle, just one, in order to see if it would help build your channel or at least get through a plateau? If you had only one weightlifting exercise available to you for the rest of your life, what would it be? So we got 2 separate questions here. First question. I think everybody's tempted at some point or another, but I've gotten old enough at this point that temptation is honestly 100% gone. At this point, I simply don't care about PEDs at all, and I honestly don't really much care about the feats performed by people who use them, or often the advice that they tend to dole out either. A little bit of a hot take, but hey man, that's just how I feel at this point. And then if I could only do one exercise for the rest of my life, front squats, hands down. Sorry, Dr. Mike. All right, and that was a lot. I think that's going to cover it for today, guys. Like I said, we'll get a part 2 maybe in a week or 2. If you have any other questions that you want for me to cover in future editions of a Q&A, if we get enough of that going, maybe we can make this a recurring series. If you got any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments on this video. I'll add them to my list. Other than that, be sure to check out EnkiriEliteFitness.com for online coaching and training programs. And as always, keep training hard. I will catch you guys next time.